Hi, everyone. Dr. Golston here once again. And in this video, we're going to discuss a number of training and development methods. Now, there is no one size fits all approach to training and development, but it is good to have a certain approach whenever you are training employees from an onboarding perspective or from a continuous career development perspective. So we're going to go through instructor-led classroom training. We're also going to discuss role play and case study analysis. We're also going to discuss business games, and then we're going to wrap up this video with on the job training and business modeling. So whenever we're discussing instructor-led classroom training, somewhat similar to what you're doing right now, where you'll have a structured training session with an instructor that is experienced in that particular discipline, and you are in that classroom setting with a number of your peers. Now, from my experience, I like this approach because there's a lot of collaboration that can take place in performing this type of training session, and you get a lot of feedback among your peers. Now, as an educator, I have found that as an educator as well as a management consultant for a number of years, yes, for instructor-led classroom training, that instructor can provide insight and input, but if those employees' peers provide insight and input, the other employees will listen to their peers and will collaborate with their peers more than their instructor because they have a relationship. Psychologically, they have a relationship with their peers, right? So some of the advantages to instructor-led training is that you will receive the same information from one trainer, so that you have that done at one time, and that you don't have this repetition of different groups of individuals getting different information from different training. All of that content, all of that knowledge is consistent among all employees within the workforce. Okay. So the instructor-led training is good. So going back to the previous video, instructor-led training is good from an onboarding perspective. It's also good for if there's going to be a policy change for an organization. Also, if we have standard operating procedures, so standard operating procedures are going to be the steps to complete a certain product, a certain process within an organization. So if there is an SOP change, a standard operating procedure change within an organization, instructor-led classroom training is another good approach to that. Some of the disadvantages is that if you have a large classroom, if you have a number of individuals in an instructor-led classroom, employees will listen passively, as you can see on the spot here. Now, I have seen from my experience, if I have 30 or 40 individuals in a room, there's going to be some that kind of tune me out, right? Now, also another thing is that, and based on the type of training that's provided, I try to eliminate the use of laptops as much as possible, because if you have laptops, you have employees, and their primary objective in that organization is keep the business running. So you'll have a number of people answering emails, in 60% of that session. So that's where, this statement of, some workers, some employees will listen passively, and will not view that information as relevant. So that's one thing to consider from an instructor-led training process. Another thing is and this goes back to, so the disadvantage here, that goes back to the collaboration and interaction of your peers, in that, a lot of people like hands-on, they learn by doing, right? Many people don't learn by listening. And I'm one of those people where I have to experience it. I have to get my hands on it to actually learn it. So that's one of the disadvantages. And one way to mitigate that risk is to, train for 30, 45 minutes, then do a hands-on group exercise. Train for 40, 30 to 45 minutes and ask a question, do like a quiz, like a verbal group quiz or things like that, or do somewhat like a brainstorming session. So kind of break up those discussions, because after a certain amount of time, you're going to begin to lose people, almost everyone. So if you're discussing a topic for over an hour, there's a good chance that you've lost a good portion of that audience. So it's good to break up those discussions and include group discussions, include brainstorming sessions, as well as include collaboration sessions among those individuals, to break those individuals up in groups so that they can collaborate on certain topics. Another topic is role play and case study analysis. So yes, this is similar to classroom training, but it's good to review a certain case study. So what we mean by case study analysis is, if we are looking to implement a certain process. So if we're looking to implement a certain process for career development purposes, we are going to review a case study, a article, if you will, of an organization that went through a similar process. And then that way you are able to assess what that organization did right and what that organization should have done differently. So those real life case studies are some things that are very beneficial, because you can actually assess success stories, essentially, right? So apart from reviewing a real life case study, you can also create a scenario. You can also perform a role play, right? So if it's a new employee onboarding, okay, you can perform a role playing exercise, if you will. You can perform a scenario-based exercise of what would be the way to effectively onboard an employee, and let your employees actually lead this exercise, because you as a leader will then be able to see what the employees want. Higher education, that's referred to as a flipped classroom, where I will actually give a topic and I let the students teach me and each other. So if you take that flipped classroom mindset within the organization and you use it for a new employee orientation, new employee onboarding, the new employees will tell you what they need to be successful, right? So that's one thing that you can do from a role play and scenario based perspective. And yes, we have the disadvantages, as that's less realistic, but I think that if you bring in those real life use cases, those real life case studies of things that other organizations have done to be successful, to achieve what you're trying to achieve, and if you bring in role plays and let the employees tell you what they need to be successful, this is a great approach. So next we have what we refer to as business games and in-basket trading. And so business games could also be situational based, can be referred to as situational based. They can also be referred to as scenario based. And so for example, if I am, so one game that I use a lot within the supply chain space. So we briefly talk about the beer game within the supply chain courses here, and you can check those out. So the beer game is essentially where you will have a supplier, you have a manufacturer, you have a wholesaler, you have a distributor, you have a customer, right? And in this game, you have a group of individuals that are grouped up. So there's a group of people that are suppliers, there's a group of people that are manufacturers, there's a group that's wholesalers, there's a group that's customers, for example. And all of those people run through this game, and they have to guess what the other team is going to order, how much beer the other team is going to order in the first iteration, right? They do not communicate with each other. And that creates all kinds of mayhem, right? Because everyone's trying to guess. And if we go back to the supply chain space and supply chain industry, in real life, because of the lack of communication, that chaos is real world. But in the next iteration, we actually communicate. So the supplier communicates with the manufacturer. The manufacturer communicates with the distributor. The distributor communicates with the wholesaler. The wholesaler communicates with the customer. And everything is seamless because that collaboration and communication actually reduces what we call the bullwhip effect. So if you are onboarding supply chain analysts, for example, on that onboarding, on that training, on that continuous improvement, you can do that beer game exercise so that they understand the importance of communication, both internally and externally. So that's one thing that is used within the industry. That's one thing that I use in the industry. Even as a management consultant, I use that with executives, so that executives understand the importance of collaboration and communication among their business partners. Now, the disadvantages that have been identified is that some can view that as artificial, in that if you are an efficient organization, you understand that communication is important, that strategy is important. So based on your business environment, that can be somewhat not realistic to the true external environment, right? So some could say that. And also, there is some disadvantage because in some cases, so if you're bringing in artificial intelligence, for example, for certain cases, for certain use cases, for certain scenarios, for certain industries, it can be expensive to do a situation like that. But in my use case, that certain scenario is not that expensive. But those are some of the drawbacks to business games such as the beer game. So the last thing we're going to discuss in this video is on the job training and business modeling. So this is one of the common training approaches in many cases. So in certain industries, I would say. So even for onboarding, even for orientation, let's just take the restaurant industry, for example. Within the restaurant industry, there is a lot of on-the-job training. So if I'm hired as a waiter or a waitress, I am probably going to go through some quick training, in the first couple of hours, my first day at work, and then I'm shadowing other waiters and waitresses, and by the end of the day, I'm probably trying to take orders. I'm serving individuals in that, or customers in that first day, right? So that can be viewed as on the job training, right? I'm just getting thrown in the deep end. And so the advantages of that is that that's very realistic, right? You learn by doing. So I learned how to be a great waiter by serving customers. All right. So that is applicable, the very applicable in certain industries. It depends on the industry, it depends on the environment. Now, and so on the within the on the job training, sometimes it is difficult to find people that are available in certain industries. Um, Sometimes those people are so good that they may not have time to train other people. And so, for example, in the technology space, on the job training, you have programmers that have a certain mindset. So yes, they're great programmers, but in other cases, it's very difficult for them to explain what they do because they've done it for so long and they excel at it. It's very difficult to break it down. It's very difficult for them to describe it. So that's another thing that's a disadvantage of on the job training. But I believe that can be mitigated by, you know, identifying those individuals that would be good trainers, that would be good mentors. All right. And if you do find those that are good trainers, if you do find those that are good mentors, if you lay out a methodology for this on the job training process, then I think that those risks, those disadvantages are mitigated and potentially eliminated. That's all we're going to be discussing in this video. Until next time.